Afternoon. Thank you everyone for coming today. My name is Preston.bigley.
I'm Amy Delgado.
Chad
I'm
Slosher. Chad Slosher.
I'm Lauren Drancon.
And I'm Albert Briones.
This is Team 3's case study presentation of IKEA in Russia. Let's get started. Eastern Europe is the regional business environment that we are proposing IKEA to expand. Notably, the chart you see visually indicates IKEA's and their top 5 competitor market share in Eastern Europe. The arrow shows that there is so much untapped market in Eastern Europe. IKEA should focus on concentrating their market share towards fragmented areas where local furniture manufacturers dominate. We believe that Eastern Europe is continually learning and adapting to manage itself as a collection of developing sovereign nations welcoming globalization and commerce. Therefore, our global marketing strategy to expand into Eastern Europe locations rests upon the interest of IKEA and the concerns the company is likely to face. According to our pest analysis of Eastern Europe, one of the most prominent concerns IKEA faces in practicing business in this region is the highly corrupt and highly unstable environment. This concern is the #1 factor that we consider regarding expansion. However, Eastern Europe is one of the fastest growing economically viable regions in all of the world. IKEA prioritizes itself on being a strategic corporation that produces high quality goods at a low cost, maintaining a comparative advantage. IKEA's objectives are always aligned with ethical business practices. They firmly believe that a regional matrix structure is the best way to espouse corporate values while considering localities. As we will see in our recommendation, the European Union plays a vital role in facilitating IKEA's management activities and objectives. We recommend that IKEA seeks expansion in Latvia. As you can see from this chart, the green indicates IKEA's projected market share in Latvia's furniture industry. We acknowledge that the projected growth by 2025 isn't overwhelming, but we determined that the 10 to 15-year forecast is the most attractive market opportunity. Our consideration consists of the recent political stability and ease of doing business for international corporations within the country. Our analysis of IKEA expanding into Latvia reveals that if they sustain a 13.5% market share average, they will add approximately $100 million in additional sales by 2025. The yellow line on this chart indicates the revenues projections without IKEA in Eastern Europe, while the blue line indicates with IKEA. There are 4 main reasons that we chose Latvia. First, our justification rests upon the long-term outlook of high revenue. Second, the emphasis for IKEA to expand in a country with mild corruption and the prioritization that Latvia is currently taking to create one of the most robust and most stable governments in Eastern Europe. Third, our analysis projects that if IKEA can be one of the first companies to break rock in Latvia as a dominant corporate furniture company, they can enjoy the luxury of low competitive threats. Fourth, Latvia is a part of the Baltic states, which has grown significantly recently. These are the reasons why we recommend that IKEA focus its expansion efforts on the country of Latvia. But what does Latvia need from IKEA? We firmly believe that IKEA needs to prioritize a regional integration into the Latvia market, which means that IKEA can rely on the KSAs they have acquired from other Eastern European countries. However, because of the cultural profile of Latvia and the way IKEA likes to differentiate itself from competitors, IKEA will use its resources and the help of the European Union to adapt to the local Latvia environment while still maintaining the core corporate values. As you will see later in our presentation, our structure, strategy, and control mechanisms align with our approach to break ground with a regional approach and then seamlessly transition into prioritizing Latvia's needs out of IKEA. We have created a detailed supply chain for IKEA to produce and distribute their goods efficiently and effectively. With the reliance of the European Union, we want to use the vast warehouse that IKEA has in Germany, then transport the goods to Poland, then to Latvia. We find this a practical method of producing as an ethical and cost-effective practice. Overall, using the supply chain route will ensure that IKEA is producing high-quality goods aligned with the Latvia business environment. Amy will now go into detail about the Latvia business environment.
Thank you, Preston. According to our analysis, we found that Latvia is one of the most accessible places to do business in the world. This factor is relevant because IKEA will enjoy a smooth integration into Latvia. Furthermore, because our supply chain process relies on long distance traveling, the high-speed internet that Latvia possesses will assist in the efficient communication in the supply chain management process. Lastly, because of the political stability and progress of economic growth, IKEA can be confident that their goal of progressing from a regional to a local integration will be a fluent process in Latvia. Specifically, Latvia has a financial support and backing from the International Monetary Fund and the European Union. All these factors contribute to the responsibility of IKEA and its strategy for entrance. As they enter Latvia, IKEA has to consider their corporate social responsibility, which is what I will discuss in the next slide. IKEA is always based on honesty, respect, fairness, and integrity. Considering that the issues that IKEA face in Russia, the corporate social responsibility that IKEA must take on is to fight off corruption in Latvia. Even though corruption isn't overwhelmingly prevalent in Latvia, there's still a need to fight it off. Our initial regional integration recommendation, along with the long-term local strategy, will help IKEA maintain a control from corporate to get rid of any ethical practices. In doing so, we believe that a joint venture is the right strategy for Latvia expansion to access the correct knowledge on doing business ethically in this country, which I'll be going more in depth about in the next slide. As you can see, the joint venture entry strategy will reduce the risk of IKEA's expansion as we help them gain local knowledge and share the costs with the local company. We believe that all these factors lead to the best thing that IKEA can do for itself in Latvia, making a difference. Furthermore, the joint venture will help IKEA accomplish its long-term goal of eventually using a transnational strategy in Latvia to sell products at a low cost that is attracted to the specific market of Latvia. I will continue discussing more about IKEA deciding to enter Latvia as a joint venture with a transnational strategy. We acknowledge that a transnational strategy might not be the best approach initially. Still, we can first focus our internal global efforts into a multi-domestic mind frame as we adopt to the Latvia environment. In that case, we believe that we can achieve a transnational strategy with the employees that we acquire from the joint venture. Achieving a transnational strategy will accomplish the IKEA mission of providing that Latvia citizens with home furnishings that they want at a reduced cost. Simplicity and detail are what we want to accomplish by studying the relative cultural dimensions of Latvia, which Frida will go more in depth about.
Thank you, Amy. According to Hofstede's dimensions, the first characteristic worth mentioning is the power distance dimension. Notice that it is considerably more than Russia, meaning that Latvia doesn't like a hierarchical structure, especially since the younger generation prefers an equalized distribution of power. According to the uncertainty avoidance dimension, Latvia citizens do not like to take risks. However, please note that this is a relative scale to the Eastern Europe. Therefore, it might be beneficial to implement a functional structure or design with our initial expansion into the country. Considering the desire for an equalized distribution of Latvia's citizens, we will need to eventually transition from a vertical hierarchical functional design into a more horizontal power structure. Furthermore, one of the most prominent dimensions seen on the scale is that Latvia is an extremely feminist culture compared to the rest of Eastern Europe. This means that citizens like to embrace a progressive mentality regarding job roles and assignments. Overall, our gradual implementation of transnational strategy will be crucial in satisfying this dimension and will allow IKEA to appease the collective good of Latvia while still maintaining IKEA values. In conclusion, Hofstede's dimensions reveals that a centralized structure would benefit initial expansion. However, as IKEA and Latvia become more interdependent, we will need to make the necessary changes to align with Latvia's progressive work culture. As for autocratic leadership style, their ranking compared to Russia and Eastern Europe indicates that they prefer leaders concerned with the group and collective good. Therefore, considering this dimension, IKEA must stress the importance of socialization and eventually transition into an appropriate horizontal structure based on organic communication. The last cultural dimension that IKEA needs to consider is that Latvia's citizens are not too concerned with status enhancing and saving face. Therefore, employees and customers might be more willing to speak their minds, which means that after IKEA lays its foundations into Latvia, it will need to consider local responsive strategies. In conclusion, Latvia's citizens understand using their collection of resources to advance their desires, so we must consider that transnational joint venture will eventually be the most effective strategy to explore what the Latvia citizens want out of the IKEA corporation. However, IKEA must first use a centralized structure, which Chad will now explain more.
Thank you, Frida. When IKEA enters the Latvia market, we recommend that they initially use a functional structure. As you can see on our organizational chart, we suggest that the Latvia directors and managers report vertically to the head of the corporate office in Lithuania. Then the corporate office will report vertically to the CEO of IKEA in Sweden. Three main principles justify our recommendation of initial functional structure. This will allow IKEA to prioritize coordination and control to combat any potential corruption during integration. As Frida mentioned, the Latvia citizens and workforce embrace equal distribution and low uncertainty. IKEA will successfully implement its cost leadership strategy and focus on ethical standards and global values for the Latvia employees. However, we recommend that IKEA maintain a long-term vision of an organic transition from a functional structure into a matrix structure. Our justification of this eventual transition rests upon our ultimate goal of implementing a transnational strategy for the Latvia division, which will be enhanced by our joint venture and the economic and political stability that Latvia offers. Our control mechanisms must align with the cultural dimensions of collectivism and uncertainty avoidance. We have decided that a mixture of bureaucratic and personal control mechanisms is the best approach for the regional and local business strategy that best aligns with Latvia's cultural profile. This combination aligns with the regional strategy because the bureaucratic control mechanism synergizes with our initial functional hierarchy and global implementation strategy. As for personal control mechanism with bureaucratic control, this will influence our stakeholders to accept our long-term vision of a transnational strategy. And due to a country's business environment, the mix between a bureaucratic and personal control will reduce the risk of corruption influences and support the Latvia's employees' value. Lastly, because of the country's cultural profile, the bureaucratic control system will smoothly integrate into Latvia because it's important to maintaining a collective and hierarchy lifestyle for security and comfort. As for the personal control system, this will ensure that we will not neglect the progressiveness and cohesiveness of the Latvia citizens. Our staffing profile and mechanisms of motivation must align with the ultimate goal of a constant adaptation of what IKEA values from what Latvia values. Lauren will now explain our staffing policy.
Thank you, Chad. Based on our initial functional structure with bureaucratic control, we find it most influential in starting with corporate human capital. Having constant communication with corporate headquarters will allow the employees that we acquired from the joint venture to develop knowledge from the corporate mission and vision and recognize how their activities and behaviors might more effectively align with corporate objectives. By implementing leadership development programs, we will continue implementing our goals and values in current and future employees who join the Latvia locations. After we feel there has been enough improvement, we plan to transition into subsidiary human capital. This will help IKEA adapt its experience to the local environment to support corporate goals while laying the foundation for further local innovation and responsiveness. Ultimately, this transition from corporate human capital to a subsidiary approach will ensure that we dilute the risk of corruption early on and maintain a centralized approach throughout development and head towards our desired matrix structure and transnational strategy that we plan to eventually implement in Latvia. Albert will now discuss how leadership and motivation play into our recommendation.
Thank you, Lauren. IKEA needs to ensure that through their control mechanism that they do not become overly autocratic. However, it is essential to note that Latvia reporting to the Lithuanian divisions will be an effective way for leading and motivating because both countries are part of the European Union and the Baltic states. Furthermore, because of Latvia's importance on fairness and equality, the IKEA leaders need to be submissive and concerned about the collectivistic nature of Latvia's citizens. In conclusion, our leadership and motivation style takes into account the cultural profile of Latvia and aligns with the progression of our structure and design. In summary, we recommend that IKEA take advantage of the vast market share in Eastern Europe, specifically in the country of Latvia. We are confident that Latvia's political and economic state best aligns with IKEA's management strategies and objectives. In doing so, IKEA will not only add $100 million by 2025, but it will also enjoy a significant growth period once it can implement a transnational strategy with the matrix structure using its joint venture as a reference. However, to ensure that IKEA respects the Latvia business environment and avoids corruption, we are confident that a functional vertical structure will be the best initial organizational design. In conclusion, because of the cultural dimensions of Latvia, IKEA can produce high quality goods that the Latvia citizens will appreciate, but while still maintaining their cost leadership strategy. And that concludes our presentation today. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our presentation. Please refer to this next slide for references to our research.
Hey, excellent. Yeah, so let me ask a question back again on the cultural charts because the interpretation. If you go back to the Hofstede charts. And, oh, okay, I'm sorry, the globe leadership charts. So one point is there's globe's cultural dimensions, and then these are actually the leadership dimensions here. So with revising the interpretation, which I think you actually got, but the baseline there, which is the second line down, is 0. That's the average of all of Eastern Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Latvia's, I mean, talked about team-oriented leadership. What does that tell you?
Wait, Dr. Stanfill, can you ask that question again, please?
Yeah, just so with making sure that you understand the perspective that the baseline represents the average of Eastern Europe where IKEA has presence. So whoever did the cultural, and I didn't write down names, I'm sorry. Can somebody interpret what is that team oriented? Because it seems like that's the biggest blue line.
They like to, they prefer a collective good outlook, and they like to make the decisions together instead of making the decisions for their own.
Okay, and actually with the team oriented, they're going to be much less team oriented than the rest of Eastern Europe. And that was my bad for the chart format. So the baseline there, rather than this showing you what the Latvia score is and then showing somebody else's, I just said, okay, here's base. So Latvia, you'd want to address the biggest line differences.
So may I just jump in real quick?
Sure.
The reason I guess we didn't address the team oriented line the biggest was because I know in one of your videos you talked about how, I don't know, the way I interpreted it, I was looking at the numbers and it was so far away from the average of Eastern Europe or something along those lines that it would be hard to explain in the presentation. That's why I was looking for something that was relatively more close. I don't know. But honestly, that was one of the harder things to try to dive into, but we'll definitely take that more into account to figure out a way to make it more clear.
Well, it's actually my bad on the chart, throwing a new chart format at you.
I like
yeah. So
Okay.
Just so you know that it was just a perspective change.
Okay.
But otherwise, I love the slides. You see there's very few words on them. It was quick fire that I've got an image and then you talked about it and then went on to the next slide. I mean, I don't know how many slides you got here, but maybe 30 or 40, but you just bang, bang, bang. So it went really well. Okay, I do have a question on the supply chain from Germany, because I just pulled up a map of Latvia where it sits. I don't think you have a map in your presentation. But from Germany, they're going to have to go through Poland, then Lithuania or Belarus into Latvia. But then later on, you mentioned that it would be a functional organization based out of Lithuania, which makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So it's not really a question as much as, that detail is great, but just when you said, oh, wait, from Germany, oh, wait a minute, where it's in between Latvia from Germany, because I'd forgotten where they were. And that kind of thing. So, but other advantages when I look at the map, Latvia is right across from Stockholm. Well, right across the Baltic Sea, which
Yeah.
freezes every year. But anyway, okay. Yeah, no, everything was really, really, really strong. It just, I think the only thing was the confusing chart that I fed to you. So
All
I'll have
right.
to clear that up in my future sections.
Yeah, thank you. We really enjoyed doing this project. It was a really good
Yeah.
time. We
Okay.
had fun.
Did anybody's faces agree with that? I don't
Yes,
know.
yes.
Yes.
We did. We enjoyed it. It was fun. It was fun. We're gonna submit this to IKEA. So if we make some money off it, we'll give you commission.
Sure. Okay, good. Yeah, and I actually try to have business executives, sit in, but with COVID and doing virtually, you'd think it'd be easier, but
Right.
it's not. So I had thought that for the fall semester, I'm going to use the same structure for the project rather than having them create their own company. And I am looking to reach out to somebody at IKEA to sit on these presentations. So, but anyway, definitely on your resumes, be sure you have a line instead of applicable coursework, say, applicable deliverables or applicable accomplishments. And you could say with a team, developed a culturally appropriate entry strategy for IKEA into Latvia in Eastern Europe, considering corruption and whatever, some of those factors, not to get too wordy, but just, a couple lines. But I would encourage you on your resumes, don't say what courses you took, say what projects you did in those courses, because the business employers don't know what your courses mean, but they know about, the foreign market entry plan. Okay, then they know these things. So I would just encourage you all to consider putting, this project on your resume as, the leading team, being part of the team, doing the cultural or analysis or doing the cage analysis or whatever. So.
And Dr. Stanfill, when we submit this into Blackboard, is it okay to do a PDF version of the PowerPoint?
Yeah, I just needed
Okay.
something there so that when I assign the points, you'll get the same rather than
Right.
going individual person by person.
Okay,
And
great.
I saw that there already.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
No, thank you. Thank you, everybody. And those that were watching, I hope you saw some of the differences there and things you might try to do. Again, it was evident that you practiced this group. The handoffs were really nice, referring to what other people said and introducing. So, spot on. Right. So, all right. With that, I got to go. I got my 1 o'clock work meeting pinging.